This is Support is Sexy, episode 433, with Elle Drouin, founder of the Styled Stock Society. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elaine Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I bring you inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and lessons to help you take your business to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. If you're listening to this in real time, happy Monday and happy April. Early April already in 2018. Now, if you're listening to this later, obviously, this isn't April of 2018. But here's the thing. No matter what, no matter when you're listening to this, I am excited to have you here because you know it just would not be the same without you. Now, listen, if you are a woman entrepreneur, a woman with a message to share with the world, a woman on a mission, you must consider podcast guesting. I'm telling you, it's one of the best ways to share your message. And I'm not just saying that because I love podcasts. I do. And I always admit I might be biased, but I have seen what it can do for your business as someone who has featured other women on my show on the podcast and heard feedback from them, but also as someone myself who has businesses and I've gone on other podcasts who have been so gracious to extend their platforms to me and seen the response when other audiences hear from me, not just my own audiences, although you know, I love you guys. So I appreciate you listening to me and I appreciate having the opportunity to share my message elsewhere. So if you have a message, a business, you're a coach, you're a consultant, you're setting up other kinds of businesses and you want to just share your message with people, tell people what you're up to, how to get in touch with you and share your expertise, consider podcast guesting. And I have a free guide for you on how to be an unforgettable podcast guest. Just go to girlonpodcastgift.com. That's girlonpodcastgift.com. How to be an unforgettable podcast guest for all the right reasons. Now, today, I am super excited about our guest today, Elle Drouin. Elle is the founder and the creator of the beautiful Styled Stock Society. Now, I have to tell you, full disclosure, when I didn't know Elle before our interview, but when I went to her website, styledstocksociety.com, and saw her beautiful stock photography, I knew right away that I was going to purchase and support and be a part of it, become a member, which you'll hear more about in this episode, how you become a member, how it all works. But I just loved Elle's business idea. I loved the way her website looked. I loved the images. I did go ahead and buy after talking to her. So I am a member and I absolutely love the access to the beautiful images that she has. But what I enjoyed about this episode and talking to Elle and getting to know her is that she talked about how to really focus on creating revenue in your business that is recurring. You know, I always talk about 7 streams of income, creating recurring revenue. It's so important for us as women to think about that. So if the one thing that you're working on goes away, you don't lose out on everything. What are the ways that you can create recurring income in your business? Elle also talks about how to assess what people really want from you. You know, sometimes it's like that. We get precious about holding on to this one idea we have for what we're going to create. She talks about how she went through that and then had the sense, courage even, to ask people within her community, would you like this? What kind of things are you interested in? Getting that feedback and then created something that still aligned with who she was, but then something that people could really, literally buy into. Another thing that Elle talks about that you know I'm all about, starting before you're ready. So I know you're going to love this episode. As I said, I love the product, invested right away, but make sure you listen to Elle's story. That's what we're all about here, right? Of course, the services and products and things I want you to look into, see if it's good for you, invest and support these women, but truly a great story and a fantastic product. So now, without further ado, Elle Drouin. So Elle, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. So our first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
So honestly, I would say I probably didn't fall in love with entrepreneurship until probably a year or so into entrepreneurship. I think there's a lot of people who maybe grow up or think that they want to be entrepreneurs, and that was never the case with me. I'm super type A. I like boundaries and structure and paths, and I never really planned to be an entrepreneur. And even though I had a sense that I wanted to be my own boss, even when I finally quit my 9 to 5 and went all in with my business, I wouldn't say I fell in love with it right away. I think it took time for me to really feel comfortable without a direct deposit in my bank account and
Right.
without someone to kind of tell me what to do or tell me what the next step is. So it really took me probably a year or so of owning my own business to really say, you know what, this is for me, and I don't see myself ever going back to a more traditional career path.
Now, what was a young Elle like? You mentioned that you're type A. Have you always been that way? What were you like
Yes.
growing up?
I would say young Elle is probably very obnoxious, but I would describe her as a conscientious overachiever with perfectionist tendencies. On the first day of first grade, I was sharing, with your class, like they're going around the room saying, like, what did you do this summer? And I told my teacher, I learned how to spell anti-disestablishmentarianism. Like, that's what I learned how to do over my summer break.
That was your goal for the summer.
Which sounds really ridiculous and kind of annoying. But that's what I was like as a child. Actually, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I went to a very small all-girls school for 15 years. I think I had a very sheltered upbringing. And it took kind of leaving that to really understand what I wanted to do and what I was even capable of doing.
Did you have siblings?
I do. I have an older sister who's actually 8 years older than I am, and a younger brother. But I think it's interesting because they're so far apart. They didn't really grow up together. And I grew up kind of idolizing my sister, who was so much older, but then she went off to college when I was only 10. And then from that point, I was kind of the older sister to my younger brother. So it was sort of like two different parts to my childhood that were very different.
Right.
And they don't really, have a relationship because they're so far apart.
So it's sort of like you had a bit of your life where you were the younger sister, and then you had the bit of the life where you really were the older sister. You didn't feel like a middle child, in other words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. In what ways would you say that your upbringing was sheltered? You mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going to a really small, all-girls, private Episcopal school is very different than I guess what a lot of other people's experiences were like in school growing up. And it's something that I didn't really think about or didn't really realize how different it was until I went to college. And I met people who graduated with, thousands of other people. My school wasn't particularly diverse. I'm actually first generation Filipino American. My parents are both from the Philippines. They met when they both came to the US in the 1970s and assimilated and very much wanted us to kind of like be normal, what they would call normal American people. And so like I didn't really realize that I was different, or that there are things about my culture that were different, or that there were other cultures outside of the bubble. In the same way that I think I would have maybe if I had gone to a larger school where there was more diversity, or there were people who weren't kind of all the same.
Were your parents very focused on you and your siblings finding a quote unquote good job?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't think that there were other options. I grew up thinking that, if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, or even, at some point I thought like going into business of some sort, but like very like corporate, like traditional business, that it wasn't really, I wouldn't say it was frowned upon, but they definitely weren't supportive of kind of alternative career paths.
Right. So that's what I find with a lot of people who have parents from different countries who very much want them to take it's doctor, lawyer, engineer. Certain things are seemingly success, right? And then you
exactly
decide to be an entrepreneur and do something crazy. Yes, awesome. So, what would you say then was the turning point for you? Well, you mentioned it that you went into a regular 9 to 5 after school, I would imagine. And then, what was the turning point for you when you really said, "I'm going to go off and do this entrepreneur thing full time"?
Yeah. So in college, I majored in international business and finance, not for any particular reason. Like I wasn't really into business. I think I was just good at math.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to be something that my parents accepted and that I thought like, okay, I could do this. I kind of envisioned myself climbing the corporate ladder. You know, my like aspirations were like the corner office and power suits. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't really now when I think about that, I'm like, really? Why? Like,
Right. Like, where
why?
did that come from? Exactly.
um,
And where did you go to school?
so I went to George Washington University in
Okay.
Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really ended up with my first job out of college because I had been interning at a Swiss bank and they offered me a position. It was like, great, I don't have to apply for jobs. So I started my career as a financial advisor. I wore conservative corporate suits to work every day. I mean, honestly, if you told me when I was 22, fresh out of college, that now I would be working from home in yoga pants, making more money than I did at finance, I would have completely laughed at you because I thought it was like a very practical, very expected job and something that was, you know, it was going to be safe and pay the bills. And I would climb that corporate ladder. And working in finance after the market crash was very much not like that.
Mm-hmm.
People were getting laid off right and left. You never knew if you would come to work and then your best friend would be gone or your boss would be gone or your whole team would be restructured. It was actually not safe and not the type of environment that I expected. And it's interesting because I think that maybe if I went into finance at a different point in time, so not right after the market crashed, for example,
Right.
would it have been different? And I honestly don't think that I would have stayed in finance, but maybe I would have stayed longer. Maybe I would have taken a different path. I don't really know. But
It's so interesting because it is such a new reality for all of us now, having been through that, whatever industry you were in, but certainly I would imagine in finance, it's sort of like, as you mentioned, that was the quote unquote safe job or the practical route. And then now we all realize no job is really a safe job. If something happens in the economy or your industry, I know people in journalism who thought they'd be in their positions forever. Then here comes the internet, and all of a sudden, you know, everyone's struggling to keep up with the internet if you're at a magazine or newspaper. So it's interesting that, as you said, it was safe at the time until it wasn't, right?
exactly. So I think when I was working in finance, one of the things that I just like needed for myself was a creative outlet. And so I started a blog, which at the time was like just totally for fun. It was like a lifestyle and beauty blog. And I just wanted somewhere where I could like talk about the things that were fun and interesting to me and not so serious because most of my life was very, very serious. And I didn't expect it to turn into anything. It didn't really turn anything other than I started gaining enough of a following that I started working with some smaller brands on different partnerships. And one of them actually approached me to ask me about, you know, how I build my audience and questions specifically around blogging that led me to actually move to New York, quit my job, and go work for them as their director of marketing.
Were you still in Tennessee? No, you weren't in Tennessee at this time.
Yeah, so I was in DC and I moved to New York about 4 years ago.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, so what was, so continue. I want to hear the rest of that story. How did you sort of make that transition?
Yeah. So for me, I think that working in finance and working in business, there's so many things that go into what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. But the things that I really enjoyed doing were the kind of business building opportunities. So things where I could do business development and bringing in the new clients and not actually like managing people's money on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so marketing was something that I didn't realize that I had kind of already been doing. And then in starting my blog and working with different brands, it was something that I realized like, oh, this is actually this is actually a different career path. And it's something that, you know, I took marketing classes in college, but I never thought that I would work in marketing. It was sort of just like, you know, and when you're studying business, it's one of the things you do. And so I had education and I had experience doing it, but I never had really labeled it as marketing until I started working with brands. And then I'd be like, oh, I know how to do this because I learned how to do it, not just, you know, like things came easy to me. And I realized it's because I had experience doing it. It was just in a different setting. And so I thought that, you know, if I knew how to bring in clients, if I knew how to grow a presence online, I could apply those skills to things that were more fun, that weren't finance related. And so I ended up working for a fashion e-commerce brand for a couple of years when I moved to New York. And I was freelancing with a few other small businesses, mostly in the fashion and lifestyle space. There's so many startups in New York. A lot of people were kind of getting more into social media. And kind of around the same time, I stopped blogging about whatever and started sharing more of the marketing and blogging tips that I had learned over the past couple of years. And I realized at some point that I was spending a lot of time kind of managing other people's marketing, but what I really thought I wanted to do at the time was kind of teach other people and help them with their marketing, but not actually manage the day-to-day. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of the point where I said, okay, I'm going to leave my day job. I'm tired of working for other people. I just want to be my own boss. And I originally launched my business thinking that I was going to be a marketing consultant or like strategist. And I was going to work with small businesses to help them with their marketing plans and strategies. And I really quickly realized that consulting was spending a lot of time talking to other people. And I'm actually super, super introverted. And I would be at the end of my day just feeling exhausted because I just felt like I talked to people all day. And I knew it wasn't sustainable. I wasn't really happy trading kind of my time for money. And so I started experimenting with other income streams. So I launched a few online courses. I had some digital products. I kind of, the first year of my business, tried all the things, try to figure out like, what is it that I want to do and what is it that people will pay me for?
Which you kind of have to do, right? A little bit of experimenting. Most people think that you jump right into it, know exactly what you want to do. I feel like especially in the online space, you have to decide what part of it works for you.
Exactly. And that's honestly not something that I knew at the time.
Right. Who does? I didn't either. Yeah.
fall in love with entrepreneurship until a year in. It's because that first year I had no idea what I was doing really. Like I would, I'd read blog posts and listen to podcasts and try to get advice from all the people on the internet. But it really took me like doing things and figuring out for myself to figure out what I wanted to do and what I was good at and what people would pay me for too. So that's a long way of saying that I worked in marketing, and at some point, it was actually just under 2 years ago, so a little, let's say 18 months ago, I was at a point where I was tired of consulting. I had just launched 3 courses in 3 months and I was burnt out, and I was just like, okay, what can I do to create a new income stream that brings me recurring revenue? Because the ups and downs of launching were not for me. It was something that I really struggled with because it wasn't that I couldn't get clients and it wasn't that people weren't signing up for my courses. It was just I was doing all these things and I felt like I was doing them right, in quotes, like I was doing them right and I was making money, but I wasn't happy. And I didn't understand that it was the things that I was doing and the way that I was building my business that wasn't making me happy. And it kind of took figuring out like, okay, what is it about this that isn't making me happy? And one of the things was the ups and downs and just like not really knowing, what I needed to do to kind of get back to that. When I say like, I liked having a direct deposit every 2 months or 2 weeks. And I liked kind of the stability of having a day job. I didn't actually, want to go back to having a day job, but I needed to figure out a way where I would be bringing in recurring revenue on a regular basis and not having to create something new all the time. So actually went through my email opt-ins, like anything that I had, like content upgrades or just different free offers that I had built an email list through, because at the time my email list was the thing in my marketing that was converting at the highest rate. So I went through all my email opt-ins to try to figure out, like, why are people coming to me? What are they opting in for? What do they really want? And I realized that in like a 2-month period, there had been 1,000 people who had downloaded some free stock photos that I had put up just like as a freebie on my website. And they were just random photos that I had taken. I wasn't a photographer at the time. I had been a marketing strategist. And one of the things that I had done when I worked for startups was take photos for social content, because they were, small people who didn't have full-time photographers on staff. And so like taking photos was something that I had done, but I definitely had not thought of myself as a photographer. I took photos for my own blog and social content, and I just had taken some extra photos that I put up as freebies. And I was like, wow, 1,000 people downloaded these photos. So I actually reached out to a few of the people and just kind of wanted to get feedback. Like, do you like these photos? Like, are you using them? Have you found them to be useful? And the thing that kind of kept coming up again and again is that, I could talk to people about strategy all day long. I could tell them, if you want to grow your Instagram account, like you need to do all these things. And, one of them is having cohesive images, and I could talk about it all day long. But if people didn't actually take the photos themselves or hire someone to take the photos, then they wouldn't implement the things that I would tell them to do. And so I realized, when you think about it, people, especially with online businesses or online creative businesses, even more specifically, need visual content all the time. We need photos for our website, for our blogs, for our social media, for, if we sell digital products, or if you're running ads, any kind of marketing material needs visual content. And a lot of people have businesses where it's not all about them, or it's not all about their products. So they're not just, having product photos or like headshots, things like that. They needed other images to share across their marketing channels. And so I thought, what if I gave them that content? What if I gave them those photos on a regular basis? Would people pay for this? And so I just said, okay, like, would you? And I sent out an email to, I think the very first time, it was just those 1,000 or so people who had downloaded the free photos. And I said, look, I have this idea. I know I'm not a photographer. I literally said that in the email. I'm not a photographer, but
clearly they like your images.
I can take photos from you. Like, you've downloaded my free photos. If you like them, if you're interested, I'm going to start a stock subscription where I will just give you 30 photos a month for like a regular fee. And at the time, I didn't have a website. I didn't have like a sales page. I didn't have anything for the software. I hadn't even taken the photos yet that I was going to sell them. I just
important though that you did that before you did all the other things.
Yeah. At the time I was like, oh, like I should really, like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do all these things first. And I remember talking to my husband. He was like, no, you don't. You need photos, and you need a way for people to pay for them. And that's all you need. And until you know that people are actually going to pay for them, like, don't waste time doing all this other stuff that you feel like you need to be doing. So that's what I did. I sent out an email to 1,000 people. I think in the first 2 days, I did like a special promotion, like pre-launch, and I had 70 something people sign up in the first 48 hours. And I was shocked.
That's great.
Like, why do people want to pay me for photos? Like, I don't understand, really. I mean, it's great. I'm like, sure, I'm definitely going to do this. This is going to be like a new fun side income stream that I create. And I realized that the pre-launch promo that I had created was probably too cheap. I thought that, maybe people are just signing up for this because it's like really, really discounted. So I raised the price after the first 2 days, and I pitched it to, I think, 2,000 more people. So yeah, I in total during my actual launch period, I pitched the idea to 3,000 people and had 150 people sign up. So I was like, okay, this is a real thing. Like, people want to pay me to take pictures. That's great. But I honestly didn't have a plan to get more members. I was
But
just
that's
like,
still great. I
this
think,
is a thing that I'm going to do.
right.
And it's going to be a fun little side project. And I didn't think that I was going to stop consulting or stop having courses completely. I was just happy to have something that was recurring,
Mm-hmm.
that I thought would, lead to maybe a couple $1,000s recurring on the side, so I didn't have to stress about having some sort of base income on a regular basis.
Right.
And I guess we can fast forward. And
Well, first, before we fast forward, because you have
sure.
to check out, yes, the beautiful images, which of course will have a link to the website, styledstocksociety.com. But what I want to highlight, Elle, that you shared so beautifully, and I'm so glad you really got into all the different pieces of the journey and how you built the business or at least started it. One, that you decided to take a look at what people are coming to you for. And I think a lot of us sometimes get so caught up in the thing we want to create, or like you mentioned, what feels fun or what you feel like what you should be doing, as opposed to looking at, well, what are people really asking me for? And I think that's something that comes up too, as we talked about in the journey of entrepreneurship, that first year or so, you're figuring it out. For me, that's the thing that made me be like, okay, people keep asking me about, for example, creating your brand story or storytelling and those kind of things. And sometimes it's things that come either naturally for us or things we're doing, as you said, on the side. And those are the things that people are really looking for from us. So I think that's important for people to catch from what you did. Also, that you had a list. It sounds like you had an email list based on what your offers were. So you had people that you could reach out to who were already engaging with your brand in some way. So I always try to push the women in my groups, and for myself, build your email list, because this is an audience that you can tap into as you did and ask those important questions. What do you like about this? Would you pay for this? And then the last thing, there's so many others, but these are the things that I caught. The last thing I love that you said too was, I believe, well, you thought it and your husband confirmed it. Don't wait until you have all these other pieces in place. These are the things you need to start, and then you can continue to grow from there once you see that people are interested. So I think that's really important for people to catch if you're in the early stages of your business, or even if you're thinking about a pivot or anything like that, this part of your journey that you had in place.
Yeah,
Did I get that right as a summary?
those are great takeaways. And I do think that it's important to, kind of put out there that I did have an audience when I started the Standout Stock Society, which is now kind of its own business. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
kind of its own business. It is its own business. And that obviously made it easier because I wasn't starting from zero, that I had an existing audience that I could reach out to and figure out like what they wanted. But even if you are just starting out, you don't have to have an audience that is kind of pre-built to ask these questions. You can build a community of people who aren't necessarily like already your customers, and figure out like what they want from you.
Mm-hmm. And even tapping into, for people who that's a great point, don't have a list or anything yet. But if it's your Facebook group or, your friends on Facebook, even though your friends aren't necessarily your customers, but just places where the people who could potentially be your customers are, so you can get some kind of feedback and see if people would be interested in it. I love that. So then you decide, you get to the point where you feel like this could be something, or at the point you mentioned, you just at least knew it would be recurring revenue. What came next for you?
Yeah, so for the first 6 months or so that I had the Standout Stock Society, it was just a really simple membership or subscription. I would say the Standout Stock Society kind of went from something that was more like a subscription box, where you would get like, a certain number of photos every month. You didn't get to pick them. I just took some photos, you got them, and you paid like a small fee.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of went from that model about a year in. I went from the like subscription box model to more of a Netflix. So instead of having just 30 photos a month, I built up a library of stock photos that people, if you remember, you could go in and download. So now when anyone joins, instead of just getting a set number of photos a month, they get access to our entire library of stock photos, which currently has about 1,500 photos. I try to keep it fresh, so there's new photos every month. And we also take out older stock photos on a regular basis so that they don't just sit there for months and months and months at a time.
So it's not like some of the other services where you pay a certain amount for each image. As you said, you pay a subscription amount and then you get access to all of these images and you're constantly refreshing that library, so to speak.
Correct.
Okay. And when you started, I forgot to ask you this, when you started with your promo, when you first were letting people know what you were doing, what was the amount that you offered as a free offer? Not a free offer, excuse me, an initial offer for people when you mentioned you thought it was too low?
So I think it was $50 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just because I wanted people in the door. I wanted
Right.
people to kind of commit to saying like, sure, like I'll do this for a year. And hopefully over that year, my thought was those people who stuck around, who were actually using the photos, I could figure out kind of more about what they wanted and figure out what was missing in order to grow my membership.
And then you raised it after the 48 hours or so, you raised it to how much or increased it by either percentage or amount you could tell us.
So I'm pretty sure I doubled it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a couple different options. So I did like monthly, I think monthly every 6 months and every 12 months in terms of like the pricing options. And I've changed the pricing a lot over the past. So it's been, I guess, over a year and a half now. No, that's not true. Was it 2 years last summer or was it just 1 year? I am like, the time is flying so
I do
fast.
that all the time. So at a point, I'm always like, I don't remember what year it was. It was a while ago. It just all blends together.
Yeah. So we're between a year and a half and 2 years. I haven't hit the 2-year mark yet. I had to think about that. But yes.
And so how has it been having this sort of model? How has it changed your business today, or the focus of you from a consultant to focusing on a business like this today?
Well, on one hand, the reoccurring income, which was the thing that I originally, kind of set out to create, it is there. And it took a while to get it to the point where it replaced the rest of the income that I was getting from courses and from consulting. But so over the first 6 months of the Style Stock Society, I still had courses in consulting. And then as of January of last year, of 2017, I basically stopped doing everything else.
So it replaced sort of that other income.
Yeah. So it took me about 6 months to replace the income that I was making from the other services that I was offering. One thing that I don't talk about that much is that I do custom photos for brands as well. I'm actually kind of phasing out of that as well at this point, because I realize that my time is better spent creating content for as many people as possible. And so I'm being very, very particular about the one-on-one clients that I do take on. I have to be very excited about their brands to do custom work at this point, because I know that I can reach so many more people through my Style Stock Society and the other places that I style stock photos.
So now you have, I'm looking at your website, quarterly $69, right? Auto billed every 3 months. And then an annual $199, your most popular plan, it says. And then a lifetime for $299.
Yep.
And that means access to all images moving forward. You don't have to pay another membership fee. Is that right?
That is correct. And that's actually a new membership that I just added at the end of this past year, or really like January 1st of 2018, because I thought that, so I originally had some monthly plans, and as we grew the library, I really, when you have a membership or any sort of subscription-based business, the thing that you have to think about that I honestly wasn't thinking about in the beginning is your churn rate. And, people will pay for a month and some people will leave, or some people will pay for 3 months and then they'll leave. And so you have to be really conscious, I think, of, a few different things. I think your churn rate, the average revenue per customer, and the types of content that we're creating that I would say perform the best. But for me, that means what are getting the most downloads, because those are the photos that people are actually attracted to and using. And so there's a lot of things that go into running a membership or subscription-based business that I honestly didn't think about in the beginning, and that I've had to sort of learn along the way. But I just have sort of been having to become obsessed with making my customers happy and making sure that I'm continuing to provide content that they like, and also content that will bring in new potential members as well.
Right. Excellent. And I think for anyone listening who's either thinking about whatever the membership site looks like for you or whatever the business looks like for you that's going to be recurring revenue, I've been thinking a lot more like this too, just as similar to what you said of thinking about how do I want to spend my time, first of all. And if I put more of my energy into whatever type of business. So for me, it's starting a podcast booking service for women and having women apply or subscribe, if you will, to services on a monthly basis to get them booked on podcasts. And it's been a business that is just growing naturally and organically, which I started in January, which like you did, I sort of looked at, well, what do people always come to me for? What do they always ask me about? And then this became something that's now recurring revenue for me, the more women I continue to add to this program, if you will, this service, if you will. So being able to look at that, whatever your membership looks like, whatever you're offering, something that you can continue to provide value to people, as you said, so they continue to want to pay for the services. And you're not spreading yourself, at least in my case, I had to think about how can I not spread myself too thin trying to do the other things I think I need to do, the courses, the constant consulting, the one-on-ones, and focus on really providing value to people who are going to pay for the service again and again. So
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, how is it, what has it been like then having now a membership sort of site or having a subscription service? Do you feel like this is something that you're going to continue to focus on and continue to, well, let me stop first. Everybody, you must, I will have a link, of course, but go to styledstocksociety.com. I've already told Elle that I'm going to sign up. I have the page bookmarked. The images are incredible. And let's talk about that for a moment. The fact that you weren't a photographer or a trained photographer, I should say, but your photos look like professional quality photos. And they're photos that I'm not going to take myself. And that, just like you said, people were probably thinking, well, that's great. You're giving me advice on how to make my images beautiful, but I'm not taking those pictures. So how did you decide that or get over any kind of fear or hesitancy of just, well, I'm not a photographer, but I'm still going to do this?
Yeah. And it's funny because I honestly didn't call myself a photographer for, I'd say at least the first 6 months, if not 12 months that I had the Styled Stock Society. And I sort of hid behind the other stuff that I was doing. I'm like, oh, I'm still a marketing consultant. And I still, I have online courses and all this stuff. And I didn't, even though photography like then became the thing that was driving the majority of my revenue, I still was really uncomfortable saying I was a photographer.
You're still like, I'm not a photographer.
I never planned to be a photographer. I honestly, and this is something that I actually just even like told my email list, which is like my baby in terms of like my audience and the people that I feel like I tell like my secrets to and no one else. I'm telling your listeners this as well, but I haven't really put this out there that for the first 11 months that I ran the Styled Stock Society, I didn't actually have my own camera. I had borrowed a camera from my husband, and it was a nice DSLR camera. I'm not going to say that it was, just like a random piece of equipment. It was a nice camera, but it wasn't mine. It wasn't until that I think I really invested in my own camera and my own lenses that I felt like I could be like, yes, I am a photographer because I made that professional investment. But for the first 11 months or so, I just took photos with this camera that I quickly learned how to use. And I think that, I'm still learning new things all the time. I'm learning new things about my camera. I'm learning new things about editing and Photoshop and Lightroom and things like that on a regular basis. But I never really let the fact that I didn't think of myself as a photographer prevent me from selling photographs, which is sort of weird to think about because in my head, I have lots of things that I could work on my mindset for, but I think sort of the fear of putting myself out there in that way wasn't really there because I had kind of pre-validated the idea and I knew people were paying me. So it's sort of, for me, it didn't really matter that I wasn't the best photographer, that I didn't even think of myself as a photographer. All that mattered was that I would take pictures and people would pay me for them. And that drove me to want to get better at doing it because then I thought, okay, if I can get better at taking photos, if I get better at styling photos, then more people will pay me for this.
Right. That's such a good point. Thank you, first of all, for sharing something that you usually just share with your email list. I appreciate that. I think it'll be so helpful for our listeners, though, just to your point of you didn't consider yourself a photographer, but you did know that your business idea was validated by people who were willing to invest in you. So I think it's an example of one, moving through any kind of fear or hesitancy you might have, but also being focused on the thing that matters in that moment. We can get focused on the I'm not this, I don't have this yet, and that kind of thing, as we talked about earlier. But it sounds like you really focused on, well, this is what matters right now.
Yep.
And one of my favorite quotes is from this woman I used to work with. She was the CEO, so I guess work for, years ago at iVillage. And I remember her saying at this event one time, you have to decide what matters and what doesn't. If you decide that it matters, make it matter a lot. If you decide that it doesn't matter, then it shouldn't matter at all. So that's something that I try to remember when looking at what matters. And it's like, well, okay, I decided that it doesn't matter that I'm not a photographer, but we're going to take these pictures and you're going to pay me for them. So you decided that it mattered, and it matters a lot. And as you say, you can always, and I'm sure you are, get better and better. You can take the training and do whatever else you need to do to get better.
Exactly. And as my skills have grown, my membership has grown, and also my prices have grown.
Right.
And it's just, the process of running a business and getting better and figuring out what works.
So one of the things I like too is that you seem to focus on your niche, if you will. So you do photography, of course, great, beautiful styled stock images. But one of the things, at least in the language on your website, is you're focusing on women entrepreneurs. So what was the decision there for you what was the thinking there, I should say, when you made that decision?
So I have kind of always worked with women entrepreneurs, and even when I was consulting and doing courses, I had a couple of men in my Facebook group at some point, which I struggled with trying to figure out, like, how do I get them to not be there? Because I realized that I really did want to talk to women. And I don't know, I think it's a combination of just like the experiences. And as I said, I went to an all-girl school for 15 years, and I didn't really think about how much that affected me. I think after I graduated from high school, I was like so excited to go to college and like be in a co-educational environment that I sort of like forgot that I went to an all-girls school for such a long time. And then when I work in finance, it was sort of the opposite. It was a very, very male-dominated industry. There weren't very many women at all in my office. And the majority of the women who were in my office were kind of like administrative or support staff. So there weren't a lot of women in roles, in management roles, or even as other women financial advisors. I think there was like 2 other women in my office at the time. And so when I started my own business, I didn't actually think like, oh, I'm excluding men. But I have a very feminine brand, and I tend to attract women with very feminine brands. And when I thought about, the types of photos that I want to take and that I'm personally interested in doing, that is just the audience that made sense to me. I think that when you focus on what you know and who you know, you can relate to them better. And it's really much easier to grow a business when you're not trying to be the person for everyone. So I'm not trying to be a photographer to just anyone who needs photos. There's people who sometimes come to me and will ask like, I have a very masculine brand, or I'm looking for something very, very specific that's kind of out of my wheelhouse. And I have no problem being like, that's great, but I don't do that.
Mm-hmm. And I love on your website, you even say that your images are unapologetically feminine.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
So like I like fresh flowers and pretty office supplies and lots and lots of pink. And
right.
If that's not for you, that's totally fine. But that is for a lot of the people that are in my membership. And that's what they come to me for. And so they're not surprised that, next month I'm not going to all of a sudden decide that I want to create like dark and moody brown images.
Right. It'll be off brand at this point.
Exactly.
So now how many members would you say you have with Style Stock Society at this time?
So I have just over 1,000 members now.
That's awesome, Elle.
Yeah,
that's great. Very good. Okay, so now that we've established that you're a professional photographer who has over 1,000 members, what would you say are the 3 common mistakes women entrepreneurs make when it comes to imagery for their brands?
Okay, so I think one, and this is not okay. I'll just say using only the free photos that they find online. And it's not because I want you to pay for my photos. Like I totally, if you want to, that's great. But if you want to hire your own photographer or find paid stock photos somewhere else or take your own photos, that's totally great. But when people only use the free photos that they find on the internet, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of copyright issues that people aren't aware of. They think that if they're just like free photos on the internet somewhere, that they can use them for whatever they want. And that's not always the case. I think
to be careful with those Google images.
Yeah, there's lots, there's lots of bad horror stories about people using images that they thought they could use, that they thought they found for free on websites, and they didn't really have the rights to use them. So I think that's one thing to be aware of. But also the other side of that is that thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people are using those same images. And in a world where a lot of us are working in industries that are oversaturated, when you're competing with, other consultants and coaches and designers, and you're trying to stand out online, if you're using the same photos that thousands or hundreds of thousands of people are using, you're not standing out.
Right. And what would you say about people taking and I know different stages of business, different stages of your life, maybe you can't invest right now in a professional photographer to take your picture, but I always tell people, try to get the images of yourself that you love. Sometimes women send me images and I'm not talking about that looks pretty because that's all subjective, but is this an image of yourself that you love that you're sending out to press or whoever and that kind of thing? What do you advise women to think about when taking pictures of themselves for the brand, specifically, not your personal travel images?
Yeah. And so that's the other thing that I think that women entrepreneurs sometimes not make mistakes, but have issues around kind of the personal photos versus stock photos or photos that, other people have taken that they are just like, regramming or using without permission, which is a whole other thing. But I do think that if you want to have a brand that is memorable, that stands out, that people know is so truly you, that you should have at least some photos of you, like yourself. Because even if you only have, if you do one brand shoot that has photos of you that really speak to who you are and what your business is, then when you sprinkle in stock photos, that together, that can have a very cohesive, powerful visual message that you just don't get if you're using whatever random free photos that you found on the internet. So I think thinking about your brand, and when I say your brand, I'm thinking the style of your brand and the colors of your brand and even the voice. Even though photos are very visual, I think that they have a voice, and making sure that whatever images you're using, whether they're of yourself or of other things, are really true to your brand, and that regardless of what the source is, if you focus on yourself and your brand, that you're going to have a more cohesive visual presence than if you just choose photos that, you like because it's pretty.
What would you say for you has been the greatest challenge that you faced to date as an entrepreneur, and how did you move through that, or how are you moving through that?
So I think that the greatest challenge that I face as an entrepreneur is probably a fear of rejection. And I think that I used to say in my head, I thought it was a fear of like visibility. But I realized that I don't really have a problem with being visible. And when I get in front of people, whether it's doing something live or as a speaker or even on podcasts, it's not so much the visibility as much as this fear of like rejection, or like hearing no. And it seems really silly when I say it out loud, because I kind of had to talk myself through like, oh, I don't want to put myself out there because I'm afraid people don't like me. And then I'm like, I don't really care if people don't like me.
Right.
I just don't want to like kind of put myself out there and hear no. And then I thought like, well, what's the worst case? Like, so someone says no, like then what? And And like the answer is like, and then that's it. Like there isn't like this thing that happens after that's so horrible. Like, maybe it makes me feel bad about myself, or it makes me feel less confident in putting myself there again. But the actual thing that I'm afraid of seems really silly when I break it down in my head. So I think that a lot of kind of getting through that is just mindset and putting myself out there and knowing that the more you put yourself out there, the more yeses you will receive. And the more yeses you receive, the less the no's matter.
That's right. And I think the important question that you mentioned in there that we have to ask ourselves when we do have any kind of fears or anything, hang-ups or anything like that is, okay, so for example, if someone says no, and then what? And then what? And then what? Until you get to the point, like you said, well, then nothing. I move on, or it doesn't really matter. But keep asking yourself, okay, but you imagine this worst scenario, and then what happens? And usually it's not as bad as we think.
Exactly.
What would you say entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
I think that one, I have a lot of work to do on my mindset. When you have a more traditional job, there are things that can hold you back. So whether it's your boss or corporate policies or some sort of hierarchy or even like shareholders, there are things built into the structure of your business and of your life that hold you back. But when you're on your own boss, when you're an entrepreneur, I think the thing that holds most people back more than anything else is yourself. And so for me, that has been something that I've had to work on a lot. My mindset and just like understanding limiting beliefs and understanding that I can do whatever I want. I just have to do it. And that a lot of times that's going to be something that might make me uncomfortable. But the more that you do the uncomfortable things, the more they become comfortable.
That's right. How are you working on it? Are you doing it on your own, or do you have a coach that you work with, or what are the ways that you're working on your mindset?
I don't have a coach, honestly. I think that my husband is probably my biggest support system. He's like my best friend, my tech support, and also part therapist. Because we both work from home, and he has a traditional 9-to-5 job. He just happens to work remotely. But it's nice for me because I kind of have a constant sounding board / coworker who I will just run things by. And a lot of the times it just starts with being like, so I feel like this. And he'll kind of talk me through like, okay, why do you feel that way? Or, he'll ask the like, okay, so what to get me to like really get down and dirty when it comes to my feelings around things. Cause I am very much not a feelings person. I would try to avoid them if I could. But, I think having him as a support system has really helped me get into my mindset work and figuring out, what are the things that are holding me back and how can I deal with them?
So interesting. And my closing question was going to be, if you think over your life and career and had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Oh yeah. So it's 100% my husband.
Okay.
I don't like not even a question. It's also interesting because I probably don't thank him enough now that I'm
Here's your chance, Elle. Here's your chance.
What have I said to him actually to think? And I honestly don't think that I would have a business without him. I'm sort of hesitant to say that because I'm like, maybe I could do it all by myself. But I think that I would definitely have way more breakdowns and not be at the point that I am and not have been able to get to this point in the amount of time that I have if it hadn't been for his support. And a lot of that is mental, but it is things like tech support and just helping me through different project management. And even when it comes to things like hiring my team, he's really been the one that has helped me figure a lot of stuff out. And so having him there as my support is just, it's priceless. Even though I don't pay him, I should pay him in more compliment.
Pay him in love. No, that's beautiful. You can let him hear this. This will be good start. Excellent. So tell us now how we can support you. Of course, as I mentioned, I'll have links to the website, but say it again so everyone can hear, and any social media that you want us to know about.
Yeah. So my Styled Stock membership is styledstocksociety.com. You can find me personally at elledrouin.com and on social media at elledrouin. And if you think that you could benefit from some free stock photos, you can grab them at elledrouin.com/free stock photos.
Oh, okay. That's good. So you have a certain number of images that people can sort of test it out in the beginning?
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to subscribe. I don't know about anybody else. I'm telling you, these images are beautiful. I know I will absolutely use them. They're gorgeous. So styledstocksociety.com. Elle, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you sharing your story and especially the inside things that you don't necessarily share everywhere else. I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of it.
Thanks so much for having me, Elaine.
Of course. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
I would say to be happier in life and more successful in business, do more of what works and less of what doesn't.
Excellent. Elle Drouin, thank you. Hold on just a moment. All right. Thank you so much for listening to that conversation with Elle. I hope you enjoyed it. To find out more about her, to find out more about Styled Stock Society, to find out more about her cute little doggy who has, I think, over 100,000 followers on Instagram, make sure you go to supportissexypodcast.com. Go to that search icon at the top and just type in Elle. ELLE. Her show notes page will pop up with all of the links and the resources, the ways to get in touch with her, the ways to find out more about her business, and find out if it's a good fit for you. I love that she focuses on images for women entrepreneurs, so make sure you at least have a look. Go to supportissexypodcast.com, search for Elle, and all the information will be there. All right. Thank you again so much for listening. I appreciate you being here. And until we chat again, always remember that you deserve support. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.